What would you do if your neighbor acted like they owned the entire street, and the HOA let them? It started with something simple. Watering my lawn. The summer heat had been brutal that week, and my grass was starting to dry out in patches. So, like any responsible homeowner, I grabbed my hose after work and stood in my yard, letting the cool water soak into the thirsty soil. The rhythmic hiss of the sprinkler was almost soothing, a rare moment of peace after a long day. Then, out of nowhere, a sharp voice cut through the quiet. "You've got to be kidding me. Watering your lawn in this heat? What a waste." I blinked, startled, and turned toward the sound. Across the street, Marge Dawson stood on her porch, arms folded so tightly across her chest I thought she might snap in half. She had that same disapproving glare she always wore, the one I'd seen her aim at delivery drivers, passing teenagers, and even stray cats. I had seen her watching me before, peeking out from behind her curtains whenever a new car pulled into a driveway, inspecting trash bins on collection day like some sort of self-appointed neighborhood watchdog. But she had never spoken to me directly. Until now. I let out a slow breath, forcing a polite smile. Just trying to keep the lawn from dying. Marge scoffed and stepped off her porch like she was gearing up for a full-blown confrontation. "It's summer. Of course, it's dry. That doesn't mean you can waste water like it's free." I stared at her, caught between confusion and disbelief. I wasn't flooding the street. I wasn't running a fire hydrant. I was just doing what every other homeowner in the neighborhood did. But the way she stood there, chin raised, eyes narrowed, I could tell she wasn't looking for a reasonable conversation. She had already decided she was right. "I water in the evening to reduce evaporation," I said, keeping my voice calm. "It's not against any HOA rules." Marge's lips curled into a smug smile. "Oh, honey. You have no idea what the rules around here are." The way she said it sent a chill up my spine. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about water. This was about control. And I had just put myself on her radar. The next morning, I stepped outside expecting to start my day like any other. Instead, my stomach dropped. My lawn was destroyed, deep, jagged cuts slashed through the grass, exposing patches of raw dirt. The once green yard I had carefully maintained looked like someone had taken a shovel to it in a fit of rage. I didn't need to guess who was behind it. I already knew. Marge Dawson's words from the night before rang in my ears. "You have no idea what the rules around here are." I had dismissed her as just another nosy neighbor with too much time on her hands, but this? This was something else. This wasn't about water conservation or HOA rules, this was personal. I clenched my jaw, forcing my breath to stay even. She wanted me to react. She wanted me to stomp over to her house, pound on her door, and scream accusations she could pretend not to understand. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Instead, I pulled out my phone and took pictures from every angle. Then I made a call. The police officer on the other end sounded unimpressed. No cameras, no witnesses, no proof. They weren't going to do much. But when I mentioned my neighbor's complaints from the night before, there was a pause. "Marge Dawson?" The officer repeated, his tone shifting slightly. "Yeah, we've had complaints about her before." That caught my attention. "She's done this to other people?" "I can't share details," he said carefully, "but you're not the first person to have issues with her." That was all I needed to hear. She had a pattern, a history. And now she had turned her attention to me. After hanging up, I surveyed the damage again, my initial shock morphing into something else. Determination. She thought she could intimidate me into submission, but she had underestimated the wrong person. I spent the rest of the morning fixing what I could, raking up the shredded grass, leveling the soil, and preparing to reseed. I could feel her watching me from across the street, hiding behind her curtains, waiting for my reaction. I didn't give her one. But Marge wasn't done. That afternoon, I stepped outside and stopped cold. A large white sign had been planted right at the edge of my property. Water waste violation, property under investigation. The bold red letters stood out against the plastic, designed to look official, as if some city agency had declared me a problem. But there was no seal, no city department listed, no contact information. Just vague, ominous wording meant to scare me. I yanked the sign out of the ground, snapping the flimsy plastic in half. My heart pounded. This wasn't some teenager pulling a prank, this was Marge fabricating authority to harass me. I immediately called the local water department, explaining the situation. The woman on the other end of the line sounded genuinely amused when I described the sign. "There's no investigation," she said. "We don't issue violations like that, and if we did, you'd receive a letter directly from us, not some anonymous yard sign." I hung up, a new kind of anger settling in my chest. She had completely fabricated a violation, hoping I wouldn't question it. And if she was willing to forge something like this, what else was she capable of? That night, I made a decision. If she wanted a war, I was going to be ready. I went online and ordered a full set of security cameras. High resolution, night vision, motion detecting. If Marge tried anything else, this time I'd have proof. I refused to live in fear of an old woman who had gotten away with this for far too long. The security cameras arrived 2 days later, and I wasted no time setting them up. I mounted one above the garage, another facing the front yard, and a third aimed directly at my driveway. If Marge tried anything else, I would have undeniable proof. But something told me this wasn't over, she wasn't the type to back down. I was right. That afternoon, a thick envelope from the Homeowners Association arrived in the mail. I tore it open, my frustration boiling over before I even read the contents. Violation notice. It wasn't just one complaint. It was 4. Grass not in compliance with neighborhood standards. House numbers not properly aligned on the mailbox. Trash bins left out too long on collection day. Garage door making excessive noise when opening. I laughed out loud, a bitter, disbelieving laugh. The audacity of it all. My lawn had been perfectly fine before Marge tore through it like a lunatic, and now they were citing me for non-compliant grass. My mailbox had looked the same for the past year. My trash bins had been at the curb for maybe 30 minutes longer than usual. And my garage door? It was just a normal damn garage door. It was clear what was happening. She was weaponizing the HOA against me. I marched inside, grabbed my phone, and dialed the HOA office. A woman named Sheila Caldwell answered in a fake cheery tone. "Good afternoon. How can I assist you today?" I didn't bother with small talk. "Yeah, I just got 4 violation notices, and I'd love to know how they were processed so quickly." A pause. "Let me check on that for you." I could hear her typing. Then her voice returned, overly polite. "Oh, yes, I see those complaints." Each one was submitted by a neighbor with concerns about property upkeep and community standards. I clenched my jaw. "Let me guess. Marge Dawson." Another pause. This one longer. When Sheila finally spoke again, I could hear the shift in her tone. "Sir, I'm afraid we can't disclose the identity of the complainant." I let out a sharp breath. "Right. Because anonymous complaints allow certain people to abuse the system, don't they?" She didn't respond. I pressed on. "Let me ask you this, has the HOA ever fined Marge Dawson for anything? Ever?" Silence. Then, finally, I wouldn't have access to that information. Bullshit. I felt the anger rise, but I kept my voice level. "I see. Then I assume I have the right to dispute these violations?" "Of course. You're welcome to bring any concerns to the next HOA meeting." Perfect. That was exactly what I planned to do. When I hung up, I immediately called Tom Miller, one of the only neighbors who hadn't bought into Marge's nonsense. He answered on the first ring. "Let me guess, you got the violation letters." "Yep." He sighed. "She does this to anyone who challenges her. I had to fight 3 separate fines last year because she didn't like the color of my flower pots." My grip on the phone tightened. "And the HOA just lets her?" "She's got friends on the board, Jake. The president, Mark Carter. He's been to her house for dinner at least a dozen times. 2 other board members owe her favors from years ago. She helped their kids get summer jobs. She runs this place from the shadows." I exhaled, my frustration boiling over into something else, determination. "She's not running shit anymore," I said. "I'm bringing this to the meeting." Tom hesitated. "Look, man, I'm on your side, but you need to be careful. Marge doesn't like being challenged. She'll make things worse." I shook my head. "Good. Let her." Because I had a plan. And I wasn't just going to fight the fines. I was going to expose every single corrupt thing she'd been doing. Marge thought she had me cornered. She thought the HOA would protect her, that I'd roll over like all the others. But she had underestimated just how far I was willing to go. I wasn't just going to fight the fines, I was going to expose her. If I wanted to prove Marge was orchestrating this entire thing, I needed undeniable evidence. A recording. The kind of proof the HOA couldn't ignore, no matter how deep their ties with her ran. So, I set the trap. The next afternoon, I walked across the street and approached her porch with a carefully practiced expression, not angry, not smug, just neutral. "Play it cool," I told myself. "Let her believe she's won." She was outside clipping her perfectly trimmed hedges, pretending not to notice me, but I knew she had been watching my every move. She always was. "Marge," I said casually, slipping my phone into my pocket with the voice recorder running. I just wanted to clear the air. "I think we got off on the wrong foot." Her eyes flicked up, wary but interested. She straightened, brushing stray leaves off her cardigan. "Oh? You're finally seeing things my way?" I forced a chuckle. "Look, I get it. The HOA has rules, and maybe I should have been more careful. I had no idea watering my lawn at night was such a big deal." Marge's lips curled into that smug little smile. "Well, Jake, dear, that's just the problem. Some people think the rules don't apply to them. I simply make sure things are done properly." I kept my voice light. "And how do you manage that?" "I mean, I put in a complaint about my lawn being vandalized, and nothing happened. But you file a few reports, and suddenly I have 4 violations?" She gave a little laugh, waving a hand dismissively. "Jake, the board and I, we have an understanding. They trust my judgment. When I bring up an issue, they listen." My pulse kicked up a notch. She was getting comfortable. I let her keep talking. "It's about maintaining order," she continued. "We can't just have anyone doing whatever they please, can we?" She tilted her head, her eyes sharp. "That's how neighborhoods start to fall apart." I clenched my fists in my pockets but kept my tone even. "And what happens if someone doesn't listen?" Her smirk widened. "Oh, don't be silly. People who push back usually find life here unpleasant." "Gotcha." I let a fake chuckle slip out, nodding as if I agreed. "That makes sense. Guess I better stay in line then." Marge patted my arm like she had just taught me an important life lesson. "Smart boy." I forced a tight smile and walked away, my phone still recording. That night, I called Tom and played the whole thing back for him. The moment Marge's voice floated through the speaker, bragging about controlling the HOA, making people's lives miserable, and her understanding with the board, Tom let out a low whistle. "This is it," he said. "You bring this to the meeting, and she's done." "I need backup," I told him. "If it's just me, they'll find a way to dismiss it. But if other people speak up, they'll have no choice but to listen," Tom finished. Over the next 2 days, word spread fast. I showed the recording to a handful of other neighbors, and something changed. People who had been too afraid to challenge Marge started sharing their own stories. The widow down the street? She got a fine for leaving her porch light on too late. The couple with the new baby? Marge filed a noise complaint about their crying infant. A retired veteran? He was threatened with eviction for having an unapproved garden fence. Marge had been tormenting people for years, and now, finally, they were ready to fight back. By the time the HOA meeting rolled around, we weren't just going to defend my lawn, we were going to bring her reign to an end. The night before the HOA meeting, I sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen. On it was the undeniable proof I needed, a clear recording of Marge Dawson bragging about how she controlled the HOA, how the board would always take her side, and how she could make anyone's life hell if she wanted to. But that wasn't all. The security footage from 2 nights ago showed her sneaking out in the middle of the night, stuffing fake violation notices into mailboxes. I copied the files onto a USB drive and backed them up on multiple devices. This was it. She had gotten away with bullying people for years, but this time, she had messed with the wrong person. The next evening, I arrived at the HOA meeting early, sitting near the front while the room filled with neighbors. There was a quiet tension in the air, people had heard rumors, and they were waiting for something to happen. Then, as if she owned the place, Marge walked in, her usual smug expression in place. She didn't even glance at me. The meeting began with routine business, minor neighborhood updates, budget reports, the same dull stuff that usually had people nodding off. But when the floor opened for homeowner concerns, I stood up. "I'd like to discuss some recent violations I received." A few heads turned. Marge barely reacted. I cleared my throat and continued. "I have reason to believe that these complaints were filed in bad faith, and that the person responsible has been using the HOA as a weapon to target homeowners they personally dislike." Now people were really listening. Marge let out a dry laugh. "Oh, come on, Jake. No one is out to get you. We just want to maintain community standards." I pulled out my phone. "Is that so?" I tapped the screen and let her own voice fill the room. "The board and I, well, let's just say we have an understanding. When I bring up an issue, they trust my judgment. They know I have the neighborhood's best interests at heart." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I pressed play again. "If you make too much of a fuss, well, I'm sure we could find a few more violations." A sharp gasp came from someone in the back. The room shifted, anger, realization, betrayal. Even the board members looked uneasy. Marge shot to her feet. "This is out of context," she snapped, her voice high-pitched. "This is a setup." I didn't let up. I played the security footage of her sneaking around at night, stuffing fake violation notices into mailboxes. Silence. Then an eruption. Neighbors who had been too afraid to speak up finally did. Stories poured out, how Marge had fined people for nonsense, threatened them with HOA action, manipulated the system to get her way. The HOA board members scrambled, desperate to distance themselves from her. We need to review these policies," the HOA president stammered. "This is clearly a serious concern." Marge's face was bright red. She had lost control. She stormed out before the meeting even ended, but the damage was done. Over the next week, the HOA was forced to revoke my fines, along with dozens of others. They announced new policies to prevent anonymous harassment. But Marge? She wasn't finished. 3 nights later, I woke up to the sight of my entire front yard ruined. The grass was dead, the plants ripped out, garbage dumped everywhere. She had finally snapped. I checked my security cameras. There she was, 3 a.m., standing in my yard, dumping some kind of liquid onto the grass. I called the police immediately. This time, there was no excuse, no way for her to talk her way out of it. Officers arrived the next morning, watched the footage, tested the soil. She had used a high-concentration herbicide, strong enough to kill anything it touched. She was arrested that afternoon for trespassing and destruction of property. By the end of the week, the entire neighborhood knew what had happened. People who had once feared her now openly mocked her. The HOA, desperate to save face, permanently banned her from filing future complaints. I stood on my porch that evening, looking out at my ruined lawn. She had tried to break me, to force me out through intimidation. But in the end, she had destroyed herself. As I turned on the hose, letting the water soak into the poisoned soil, I made a silent promise: I would rebuild. My lawn would grow back, and so would my peace of mind. Because no one, not even a power-hungry neighbor with HOA connections, could control my home. Have you ever felt powerless against HOA, or Karen, rules? Share your experiences below. Let's see who had it worse.